ever learned about it until much later when more things came out about him.
Understood. And when did you first learn of Mr. Epstein's arrest in 2019?
Probably when it happened, because it was headline news. I'm sure I, like everybody else, saw it in the press.
And in seeing that in the press, did you discuss Mr. Epstein or his case at the time with anyone?
I'm sure we did, because it was a, big story.
And Mr. Epstein died in custody following his 2019 arrest. When would you have learned of his death?
Whenever it was reported.
Going back slightly, a question. You said you likely would have talked to someone regarding his arrest in 2019. Who would you have discussed that with?
Whoever was around. I mean, it was a big story, as you recall. It was a very big story. I don't have any specific recollections. It wasn't something that I was particularly focused on, but it was a big story.
And going back to Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell, when did you learn of her arrest in 2021?
Again, whenever it was reported as happening.
And did you discuss that with anyone?
I'm sure I did. It was another big story.
And who would those discussions have been with?
I don't have any specific recollection.
So moving forward in time just a little bit, you were Secretary of State under President Obama, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And it was during his first term, 2009 to 2013?
That's correct.
And after you completed your time as Secretary of State, did you return in any role to the Clinton Foundation?
I did. I became active in it at that point.
And by being active in it, could you describe that for us, please?
Tried to support the work that Bill and my daughter and the team had done, and look for ways to be helpful. It was something that I wanted to make sure I could support.
And please correct me if I'm wrong. You rejoined as a board member, is that right?
That might have been the first time I was a board member. I don't remember. Either the first or the second time. Yeah.
And speaking of, it sounds like you were heavily involved when you returned to the foundation, or I guess started with the foundation at this point. In trying to accomplish those goals and initiatives, what were you doing, broadly speaking, on a daily basis, monthly basis, that sort of thing?
Well, I wanted to start a program about early learning for kids, and so we started something called Too Small to Fail, which I was very actively involved in with my daughter, and we worked with pediatricians and other people to help parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles read, talk, and sing to their children so that they could help build brain cells. That was a major priority of mine, and I'm very proud of what we've built and the difference that it's made in millions of kids' lives. I certainly did what I could to support the work that we do overseas through the Clinton Global Initiative, which has had a terrific track record of bringing people together to work in partnerships, to make commitments, to try to improve everything from clean water to solar energy to improved education, all of the priorities that the partners we have bring to us that we try to help them with.
And thank you for that, Madam Secretary. We've had a few members join us. Would you guys please announce yourselves for the record?
Yes, Pat Fallon, 4th District of Texas. Scott Perry, 10th District of Pennsylvania.
Thank you both.
You're the last person.
Mr. Perry, Scott Perry.
Thank you so much.
And Madam Secretary, as a board member, what type of responsibilities does that entail?
Oh, attending the board meetings, approving the agenda of work for the year, the budget that goes with it, that kind of responsibility.
And you mentioned the Clinton Global Initiative. Just for clarity, I will likely refer to that as CGI as we go forward with this. CGI is a part of the Clinton Foundation, is that accurate?
Yes.
And what was your role with CGI at this time period, right after you left being Secretary of State?
It was, again, to, support the staff that put together both the annual meeting, but also work during the year with our partners who'd made commitments to help them fulfill their commitments. So, if there were a meeting about a commitment that was made to get clean water to some very remote place, if there were a meeting, I might be invited to it to meet with the partners, to encourage them. It was mostly around the work that happens throughout the year in preparation for the annual meeting.
And forgive my ignorance, please, what happens at those annual meetings?
The annual meetings are a way for people to come together to make commitments that they have previewed with our staff. So I'll give you an example. Probably around, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 15 years ago, I don't know specifically, Matt Damon, the actor, came to the Clinton Global Initiative because he said he really cared about clean water, and could we connect him with people that he could work with to get more clean water in more places in the world? So we did. We connected him to this gentleman who was a real expert on clean water. They started working together. They created something called water.org, which was a Clinton Global Initiative commitment that was made at the annual meeting. And then our staff worked with them, and I think it's fair to say that, they've been one of the most successful organizations in actually delivering clean water. But it's that kind of work. It's people who might have a good idea, maybe they've got some resources, maybe they have some experience. I'll give you another idea. So Procter & Gamble called us and said, one of our scientists, one of our chemists in the UK, has created this packet of chemicals that can literally make the dirtiest water clean enough to drink. But we don't know what to do with it because we're a consumer company that sells products to middle-class people. This is something that would go to the very poor. What do we do with it if we come to CGI? Can you connect us with somebody who can help us? So we connected them with World Vision, and I think maybe one or two other organizations. And so they used the packets to literally go around the world cleaning water. And Bill went with them, Chelsea went with them, and they would go to rural Myanmar or rural Kenya, and they would take this bucket of dirty water and they'd dump the packet in, and then my daughter and my husband would drink it to show that it was clean. And that was a CGI commitment. We bring together governments, local, state, national, businesses, philanthropies, NGOs, academics, anybody who has a good idea that we can help them work on and try to fulfill. That's what we do.
And thank you. The Clinton Foundation started shortly thereafter. Your husband, President Clinton, left office. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And CGI started a few years later. Is that right?
I think that's right. I think it started maybe 2005, maybe? I'm not sure.
And does CGI or the foundation more broadly perform any work in sex trafficking or human trafficking around the world?
There may be partners who make commitments about that. We have thousands and thousands of commitments, so I can't answer yes or no, but it might be an area that some of our commitment makers would be focused on.
And how did the foundation, the Clinton Foundation, how did that idea come to fruition? Was that your idea, President Clinton's idea?
Oh, no, the Clinton Foundation was all Bill's idea. He set it up as he was leaving the White House. It was the entity that raised the money to build the Clinton Presidential Center, and then to carry on the work that he wanted to do. You know, shortly after he got out of the White House, he and Nelson Mandela were asked to come to the annual AIDS conference to see whether the two of them could do something that needed to be done, which was to try to stem the epidemic of HIV/AIDS. And so Bill started out trying to figure out how to deal with this problem and came to the conclusion that the best way would be to lower the price of the drugs that were being used in the United States but were too expensive to be used around the world in order to treat more people. And I really give huge credit to both Bill's idea about how to do that, but also huge credit to President George W. Bush, because when President Bush took Bill to Pope John Paul's funeral in Rome, he and Bill were talking because President Bush was coming forward with the PEPFAR program. And so he and Bill were talking, and President Bush was very committed to this, and Bill was very committed. And so Bill said to President Bush, I now have generic drugs being made in places like India that are much cheaper than the brand name drugs, and you could, with tax money, treat many more people. And so President Bush, to his credit, said, yeah, but my folks tell me that the drugs aren't as good as ours. And Bill said, I'll give them to you, you give them to the FDA, you test them, and I'll abide by your test. I think you can ask him if you want tomorrow, but I think he gave, I don't know, like 24 drugs, and the FDA approved 22, and President Bush was as good as his word. And so we began as the United States and the Clinton Foundation, because of that connection and that partnership, we began treating millions of people with low-cost drugs with federal PEPFAR money, saving millions of lives. Sadly, that's going to be reversed because of the attitudes of this administration and the cutbacks, but it was one of the great services to humanity. And I give President Bush and I give my husband enormous credit for doing something that wasn't going to get them headlines, wasn't going to get them, you know, some kind of, you know, statue put up, but was saving millions of lives, preventing mother-to-child transmission, preventing, you know, people from dying. So that's what he was doing.
And thank you for that. Did Mr. Band play a significant role in helping set up the foundation initially?
Yes, he did.
And when CGI was initially created, whose idea was that?
It was Bill's idea. He went to Davos, and he called me after he'd been at Davos, and he said, you know, a lot of interesting people, but they don't do anything but talk. And I have a better idea. Why don't we get people together, and yeah, they can talk, but they have to make commitments, and they have to follow through on the commitments, and we could have an annual meeting that would bring people who were willing to make commitments, and that was his idea, and I thought it was a really good idea, and I encouraged him to go out and see if he could put it together.
Are you aware of any of